Hello, I'm Father Joe Gambale, and welcome to Journeys Through Genesis. Today, we will talk a little bit about the patriarch Joseph. The last part of Genesis is about the story of Joseph. Now, Joseph was, one of two sons of Rachel. Remember, Jacob had two wives, Leah and Rachel. And Rachel, is the wife that he truly loved the most, gave him two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Well, Joseph was, to best describe it in modern terminology, a spoiled brat. His father doted on him and gave him this multicolored coat to wear. And Joseph would have dreams, and all of his dreams involved his brothers bowing down to him and giving him honor. And he would go and tell his older brothers this. Well, the brothers were getting tired of listening to this. And so one day, when Joseph was out looking for his brothers, the brothers hatched a plot. So we go to Genesis chapter 37, verse 18. So Joseph went after his brothers and caught up with them in Dothan. And the brothers noticed him from a distance, and before he came upon them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes that master dreamer. Come on, let us kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns here. And we can say a wild beast devoured him. And then we shall see what comes of his dreams." Then Reuben, the eldest, heard this, and he tried to save them from their hands and said, "We must not take his life. Instead of shedding his blood, let's just throw him into a cistern here in the desert, but don't kill him outright." His purpose was to rescue him from their hands and restore him to his father. So when Joseph came up to them, they stripped him, his long tunic that he had on, and took him and threw him into the cistern. And then when they sat down to their meal, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, their camels laden with gum, bulb, and resin to be taken to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What is to be gained by killing our brother and concealing his blood? Rather, let's sell him to these Ishmaelites." So instead of doing away from him, they sold him. Well, needless to say, one can only imagine how angry Joseph must have felt about his brothers doing this to him, plotting to kill him and then selling him into slavery. So he would never see his father again, or his brothers again, or his homeland again, to be taken to a faraway kingdom of Egypt where everything's going to be different, and with a life of a slave ahead of him. He had no way of knowing that what was happening was part of God's plan. Because Joseph, while spoiled, was pretty smart. And by becoming a slave and working as a slave, he learned quite radically to be humble, because a slave is not humble, it's going to get beaten. And Joseph had some amazing experiences. He worked for a man named Potiphar and was very successful with him. And of course, we know Potiphar's wife set him up to be sent into jail. And then he was in jail, and he interpreted the dreams of the baker and the waiter of the Pharaoh. And news of this got to the Pharaoh. And finally, one dream interpreted of the Pharaoh by Joseph convinced the Pharaoh that this man is in with God, and this man can help me out. And in following the interpretation of the Pharaoh's dream, which meant there's going to be 7 great years of harvest, followed by 7 horrible years of famine, he put Joseph in charge of preparing for that. So great grain houses were built under Joseph's command, and grain was bought, and farmers got rich because they paid top dollar for it, filled the granaries. And then when the famine came, well, the Pharaoh was ready to take care of all of his kingdom, plus others, including his brothers. So we're now many, many years later, and the famine has spread, and now Joseph's brothers have come into Egypt. And there were a number of meetings between them. They did not know Joseph was the Egyptian in charge. They didn't recognize him at all. But Joseph initially thought that he would punish his brothers by, putting them to death. And then he ran. The scene is in Genesis chapter 45. He runs, goes into another room, and cries. And he came to the realization that this whole plan was to save lives, to save the Egyptian lives, to save his own family's lives, so many countless people's lives, that why take a life when he was called to save life? and that he should forgive. And forgive his brothers he did, and he forgave them from his heart. And they warmly embraced, and he revealed himself to them. And then they got his father Jacob, they got him to come down to Egypt, and he too was reunited with his son. And it was a wonderful reunion it was. And Joseph died there and was embalmed in a tomb. And so was Jacob. Well, Joseph had to learn to forgive. It's a terrible thing to have someone to plot to try to kill you, especially his family. And then after many, many years, come to the realization that I must forgive. Forgiveness is so important. When we don't forgive, we burden ourselves. The anger is a weight that we carry upon our souls. And if we're able to forgive, we may not be doing anything for the person we're forgiving, but we're going to do a great service to ourselves. To forgive is to let go of all of that, and you find yourself free. It's like carrying a heavy weight and then finally letting it go. And so Joseph was able to let that go, because I have no doubt he probably thought about his brothers trying to kill him all these many, many, many years. And now that's the past, and they move forward. God forgives every single one of us if we ask for that forgiveness. And so ask to be forgiven, of course, but be forgiving ourselves. Remember in the Our Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.